Any comments from the public not related to the agenda? I think, Steve, you might be the only one here, and I think, was it Stephanie? Did you invite Steve?
Yes, Stephanie Smith here, Vermont Agency of Agriculture. Steve Dwinell is the new Director of the Public Health and Agricultural Resource Management Division at the Agency of Agriculture. And he is here as a visitor observer. Steve, did you want to say anything?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to sit in on your meeting. Just a little context, I'm an entomologist. A lot of experience with mosquito control. Spent several decades in Florida doing basically the same work that I'm doing here in Vermont. So anyway, glad to be able to sit in. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks. Great to have you here, Steve. Appreciate it. And maybe I'm trying to remember if we've all met or not, but I'm just going to say, let's run around the room real quick and have folks introduce themselves, just your role on the committee or the SAG, and if you want to share your pronouns, go right ahead. So Alan Strong, Chair of the Endangered Species Committee. I work in the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources, serve on the bird SAG, and then am now filling in as our rep on the fish SAG as well. I use he, him, his pronouns. And down you, Matt.
Matt Peters. I'm an independent botanist and ecologist, chair of Flora SAG, recent addition to the Endangered Species Committee as a member. He, him pronouns.
Mark Scott, Director of Wildlife for Fish and Wildlife Department.
John Cart with Fish and Wildlife Department. I administer endangered species permits.
Becca Washburn, Director of Lands Administration and Recreation with Forest Parks and Rec, and she, her are my pronouns.
Mark LaBar, Chair of the SAG Birds, work for Audubon, Vermont, he, him.
Oh yeah, let's go around online. Go ahead, Jim. You can kick us off.
All right. Jim Andrews here, Chair of the Reptile Amphibian Scientific Advisory Group. He, him, pronouns.
Stephanie.
Stephanie Smith with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture. I'm a deputy director with the agency, and I use she, her pronouns.
Bill.
Bill Kilpatrick, retired from the University of Vermont. I'm chair of the Mammal SAG. He and it.
It.
Rich.
You're muted.
Rich, you're
muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry. Rich Langdon, Chair of the Fish SAG, he, him, retired from Vermont DEC.
All right, Kent.
Hi, Kent McFarland, Vermont Center for Eco Studies. I'm chair of the Invertebrate SAG Committee.
Brian.
Well, I'm Brian Pfeiffer. I am a fauna member of the Endangered Species Committee, semi-retired consulting field naturalist, working mostly with invertebrates now. He, him, his.
Rod.
Can you hear us?
Rod, can you hear us?
Oh, did you say Roz?
I said Roz.
Sorry, Roz Renfrew, Fish and Wildlife Diversity Program Manager, former Bird SAG member, or maybe I'm still technically on it. I can't remember now.
Carla.
Hey folks, Carla Fenner. I'm a consultant with Stantec, specializing in wetland science and botany. I'm a member of the Flora SAG and newly minted member of the Herp SAG.
Thanks. Paul.
Hi, hi everyone. Paul Wizarek. I am a member of the Endangered Species Committee. I'm one of two members that represent agricultural interests, and I'm a horticulturist.
All right, thanks, Paul. And you introduced yourself before. So thanks, everyone. Again, appreciate y'all being here. Additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda. It's possible the secretary might be able to pop in and join us around somewhere between 1 and 2. So I'm just going to hold that out there in terms of a possible change to the agenda. I thought whenever she comes on, we'll probably just put whatever we're doing on pause and give the secretary an opportunity to give some updates on what's going on in A&R, some of the priorities for this year. I don't know, Bob's not here yet, but at 1 o'clock we have the permit applications, and Brian had some concerns about the rhodiola permit process permit. So I guess I was going to maybe suggest that we move those up. Brian's got to leave around lunchtime, and maybe before we jump into the SAG annual reports, we might take on those permits if Bob is around. I don't know. Is he gonna? Okay. Okay. All right. So if we could pull that off, I think that would be great. And then lastly, and Mark can bring this up when he does the bird SAG report, but we have a recommendation for a new addition to the bird SAG. And I can't remember if I uploaded that CV or not, but I'll try to do that at some point. So so I'd like to add those to the agenda. Anything else? Brian, you've got your hand up.
Nope, you covered it for me. Thanks, Alan.
Anything else in terms of the agenda? Additions, deletions, changes? All right. Awesome. Well, hearing none, we'll go on to approval of the minutes, and hopefully folks got a chance to take a look at these.
I'll move we approve them.
All right. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that, Paul Wizarek. And nice
Thanks,
job,
Paul.
Interject one small edit.
Yes. So comments, questions, edits, go for it, Matt.
I just noticed one little thing under the discussion of new SAGs section. It's a minor detail, but first paragraph, fungi, the statute states that plants are included as fungi. I think it should be the other way around. Fungi included as plants.
Very species or facts.
Large mushrooms growing all over the forest.
Did you get that, Roz? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I will highlight it here as well. Version. So we can go ahead and make that change. Any other comments? All right, thanks for that, Matt. I guess with that, I'll call that a friendly amendment, slight wording change. With that, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Tensions? All right, excellent. Minutes are approved. So I think that when I originally sent out this agenda, I should have put this in the changes, additions, deleted. Maggie, who is now the EA for the secretary, suggested Billy Coster might be able to come in and give some A&R updates. But when I think when the secretary thought she might have some time between 1 and 2, we can scratch that off the agenda. So just like that, we're ahead of schedule.
And just for reference, Maggie's actually the deputy secretary.
Oh, okay.
Sarah
Okay.
is her
Oh,
executive.
okay.
But she had been on leave.
Okay,
So I think
yeah.
Maggie was doing some
Okay.
help pinch hitting.
Awesome. Thanks for that
Yeah.
clarification. So, yeah. Great. Well, Mark, I will turn it over to you. Updates from Fish and Wildlife.
Good morning, everyone. Morning. Here to answer any questions you have regarding the department. The commissioner, I think, would probably like to have been here. He's over at legislature right at the moment, probably testifying on certain issues. But on that front, I know we are trying to take more an aggressive offensive approach with legislature, which will be interesting. My experience is I'm always nervous any topic gets discussed over there because they have no knowledge about what's going on the ground for management here in the state. One or two people they do, but anyways, so it's all, you never know when you introduce a bill what comes out at the other end. But we've got about 10 topics. Most of those are clerical, trying to improve things, changing some enforcement things to make it easier for our wardens, right? Make some penalties to where it's a civil violation instead of a criminal, makes it easier for us to process those type of illegal activities that go on. One of the main topics that we're trying to push for that's important to this group here of those 10 topics is trying to get more teeth in our regulations on turtles. You know, and you all will hurt them and amphibians. We're going to focus first on turtles, but to perhaps ask legislature for approval that we can do it through as a commissioner's rule. In the past, when we've dealt with these issues and topics, and that's been a long time since our main regulatory body that deals with all of our fishing, hunting, and trapping is the Fish and Wildlife Board. But the commissioner we're asking for authority. We do commissioner rules at times. We still have to go through the same Administrative Procedures Act requirements and public engagement, involvement, and all that stuff. But we're really trying to probably put turtles into a similar management regime that we do with those species that are hunted, fished, or trapped. That gives our law enforcement people the ability to go out there and do their job, and it's real clear. So we'll be looking at certain turtles with seasons and bag legs and some of those that there's not at all. So that's where we are with that one. I don't know why that wouldn't slide through easily over there at legislature. Sometimes it just comes down to some people don't like certain individuals and somehow things get sidetracked. But that's where we are in that one. So that's I think good news for folks here that we can go that. I'm not going to say it's going to solve the world on our issues when people out there doing not the best things with some of these critters, but and the other one tweak in legislature is trying to, I think it deals with our endangered species takings reporting requirements, and we're putting somehow we overlooked not putting a time limit on when people have to report. So we're trying to just codify that we want to know as soon as possible or within 48 hours, I think it is. The other one I just thought too, that was just interest to folks on the bigger scale. And we have actually done this before, but we got looking at it more and we said, well, maybe we better codify this with legislature that kind of called mitigation banking. It's I think actually I got to credit maybe some members here, Jim Andrews and others, that when we talked about endangered species and these taking permits, man, why can't we just get some money up front and put it and invest it in habitat where we know some of these species have a better chance to sustainability to live to occur here in the future, instead of just trying to hold on to a couple little plants, almost like a gardening exercise we get caught to do it in the plant world. So we're going back that the T&E statute, we redid that. We put that authority in there and we have that there. We don't have it on other wildlife species, critical or necessary habitats. So we're dealing with certain birds or deer yards is one of our more popular ones that is an easy example for people. You know, when we went this is through and gets through the regulatory process. When we go through Act 250, there's quite a few places in the state that 30 years ago, when we tried to have certain conditions on the developer to maintain the habitat conditions for the deer yard, the deer wintering area, it made sense back then. But as things change, and mostly to me, it's insidious development that occurs around where that necessary critical wildlife habitat is that we protected through a regulatory process. Sits there, we go, you know, this really isn't. We're better off perhaps is to allow the towns to do what they want for concentrated development, but give us the money and go invest it in a better place for long-term survival of the species. And we'll try to focus on we've done it a couple times with deer. We've got some cases on the board. It's one of the technicalities now and it's good that we probably got to go back to legislature and make sure that we can do this. So that's the three big things. So happy to answer any questions on that front or anything else. We have been successful in bringing forth two major project leaders, the game and waterfall, migratory game and waterfall project leader started just this past week. And then we've got our fur bear project leader will be starting at the end of the month to do that. But so we're catching up. And then we have as most people know here, Doug Moore is leaving, and we got approval to recruit for that position. And we recently, not due to our trying to ask to get approval, but we got approval to recruit for botanist. Good morning, Bob. And hats off to Bob. He keeps extending his retirement date because the ideal world that his work is fairly complex. It's not just going out and identifying plants and know where they are and telling us what to do and protect. And we are hoping that there's a little bit of a training transitionary period between the new wildlife botanist and Bob, but that's our wish.
Yeah.
Anyways, I can answer any other questions.
Who are the two folks who are coming on from waterfowl and fur bear?
So one is Andrew Bowden, and Andrew has a strong connection to Vermont. He grew up in Virgins area. I'm not quite sure the town that area. Some people may know in the forestry world, may know his uncle really well, John Bowden, who I worked with a lot in the 1980s as a county forester. Awesome individual. He was ahead of the curve of all the other county foresters at that time, where he was interested in wildlife outreach, communications. It seemed to be every stewardship and education program I got involved with, he was there leading the torch. Along with, I want to sadly share, I don't know if folks heard the late Gary Salmon. I just heard that he passed away. The county forester in Rutland, who was just a godsend of an individual for education out there in the forestry world. But anyways, and the other one is Brianne Furry, I believe. I got the last name right. I'll check. But she's coming from a fair bit of experience from Oregon. Both candidates are highly educated, several years under their belt doing work there. Bree has some work all over the board, but some of it on Wolf to deal with that. So and outstanding communication skills. So that's a real key in that position.
Yeah.
But we had some tremendous applicants, which I know some of you know in this room, and one or two in particular, I'm going to make a point to reach back out that it's so hard when you get these few jobs that come up, but I hope they keep their spirits high and interest in working for us, because they're so close to making that. Just a matter of getting a little more skills under the belt and finishing some things for them.
Yeah.
And so that one will be stationed, Andrew's stationed in Essex, his office.
Okay.
A waterfowl person. And the other one will be down in Springfield Creek. But, with our liberal and supportive Kelly work policy, and my bottom line to staff, whether they like it or not, is that it's so hard for somebody out of state to come here and find a place to live and to move their family. And that's how if in the bird position and in the plant position, we have ideal places where we want them because they wear dual hats. Bird hat is almost 50% land and habitat work as well. And our biggest needs are in Essex County and St. Johnsbury area. But hey, if they find a house somewhere else, we'll figure out a way to manage it and shuffle the deck. That's just that's just the reality. And we've been very accommodating in the last, since I've been here, I've done it the last 13 years doing this job, to letting people move where they ideally want to live, or it's better for their family to do it.
Yeah.
We just figure out a way to backfill for their district duties.
I'm gonna go online, Bob. It's been for a while. So Jim, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to say first, thanks, Mark, for moving ahead with protection for turtles. We appreciate that. And the commissioner's rule. And if if there was any need or desire for input from the SAG, whether you wanted us to, if you wanted me to get information on what you guys are drafting, if you wanted me to reach out to the SAG and get information, get it back to you, or if you wanted to meet with some of us, we would be happy to do that and
Thank you.
hammer out any specifics or questions.
That's awesome. So that,
That's it.
we will make a note of that and let the commissioner know that and
Okay. And secondly, on the mitigation issue, the mitigation, I think that's great. Moving in the land conservation mitigation direction. And I know that other states have done this for some period of time. And I don't know if you guys have reached out to any of those other states to see how they set up their programs, but I know they exist and they have existed for some period of time in some other states.
thanks, Jim. We're not rookies at the table, to be honest with you.
Okay.
It's just when you start looking at some details and joint fiscal requirements that we have to go through. We're feeling, let's for a comfort level codify what we're doing in language that legislature will approve. But thank you. I'll if you know those states, Jim, you fired those off to me in an email. I appreciate that because it always helps, because the first question I ever get asked in any of these public forums, everybody thinks it's greener across the river or somewhere down country. So, well, if you talk to so-and-so, you looked at that. So that is a process we always do when we're doing rulemaking and regulations, is check in mostly on our neighboring states if there's anything like that. So if you sent those to me, Jim, that'd be helpful.
I can do that.
Stephanie?
Similar issues that I have questions about, or actually comments. So on the mitigation one, I was going to also say that the Agency of Agriculture has, through the Act 250 process, does a prime agricultural soils mitigation. So there's already statute in Vermont law that kind of, for every impact you make, the agency calculates the impact, gets a check from the developer, and then applies that money to conservation of farmland. It goes to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. So there is an example already in Vermont law. So I wanted to share that with you. And then the other thing was about the turtles. Do you have the rule number name that you're going to amend? Just for my knowledge, that would be great. You can put it in the chat or send it to me else in another way. That's fine. Thank you.
Definitely share that with you, and actually our entire document that references statutes and stuff. I didn't have no comfort level to share with anybody until finally I got a text back from the commissioner, and he's over there now that I can, because I don't even know. I don't know if we actually gotten a direct response back on some of these from the governor, to be honest with you, but I think they're fairly benign fixes that we're looking for here with our proposals.
Paul?
I think you're muted, Paul.
Sorry about that. Good morning. Hi, Mark. Just some questions you were talking about, deer yards and I guess this was talking about maybe managing those in different ways. And you were talking about giving us the money. I was wondering what you meant by that. Was it money for more land acquisition or just management? Just wondering about how the state is looking at possibly acquiring additions to existing wildlife management areas, for example. And I know in the past there's been a kind of a moratorium on that, but and these questions are sort of coming out of my interest in our local land trust and some of the issues that we have with acquiring land and then trying to figure out what the disposition of that land is. Sometimes in the past, the state hasn't been interested in acquiring more land. They've got more than they can deal with. So could you maybe elaborate on where the state is a little bit with that? Thanks.
Yeah, Paul, could you clarify your comment on land acquisition? I wasn't quite sure. Were you thinking we were under some restrictions trying to acquire land as far as
no restrictions, just whether or not the state was in the position to acquire more land as, let's say in addition to
Sure.
an existing fish and wildlife management area, a local land trust maybe, sees the need to conserve a particular piece of property, but they don't have the capacity to actually own it. A lot of times, the state might be the best place for this land to, come under ownership with. And in the past, that's something that the state wasn't really interested in. So
Gotcha.
that's my
Yep.
question. Yeah.
So we use all the all the tools in the box that we have to conserve land. So whether it's through conservation easements, sometimes, deed restrictions on some folks, outright purchase is our ideal, but it's the most costly. But we also work with our partners, and Rebecca can talk about forest legacy projects, things like that. So it's interesting in the wildlife division alone, our growing number of staff, and the largest program I have is lands and habitat, and we all work together, whether we're doing on the ground technical assistance or habitat, all with the whole idea to have land being used for wildlife in different ways. And the tools we have to make those decisions, we actually have a land acquisition plan internally that we developed recently to put priorities. And that even means the hardest decisions sometimes we have to make, and that's when I usually get involved, is sometimes we can't even accept land that's being donated to us. Land comes at a cost. And I'm wearing an older conservative hat because I've worked for different governors who want no land acquisition whatsoever. Then others don't want any easements. They don't believe in them. I think that Governor Dean was one of those who just wants acquisition. So they all have different philosophies, but the one part that comes to hurt us in the long run is if we don't take care of what we have. That's the one I've learned. So we have to be really careful, and we don't want to end up just accepting lands and all of a sudden that will drive us crazy down the road because it's from right-of-ways to activities that go on the land. We own a bunch of land right now we don't have timber rights on that we wished we weren't there from the 1960s. We're working actually with A.J. Johnson down in southwestern part of the state to buy their timber rights. We thought we were all set to do it. They are graciously going to, at that time, donate half of the value of the valuation of the timber to us so we could use it for match our federal grant. So we got some great, clever ways to do it. We've been focused for a couple of years using the EPA money to focus on wetland acquisition. We parked our terrestrial land acquisitions, but deals come up that we do it. So we're all across the board. So yes, so this money would go towards trying to acknowledge that an area doesn't make sense, that this habitat is not being necessary and critical for these species that were identified years ago at the time. And due to things that happen, and then take the money, either it's a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, or 4-to-1 ratio. We rarely just go 1-to-1 economic value, because the last thing we want to do is make an incentive for developers just to buy out their rights. That's not what we're looking for. We're very cautious of that, and we're really making sure that the land we're talking about to mitigate is land that has questionable value for what it was set up to do. So there's a lot of places in Chittenden County that might fit that description too. And everything, even from, the T&E statute was rewritten. I think you remember the Green Mountain Coffee Roasters issue that we had to deal with, where there's plants within a parking lot. And there's no way we go to the governor and say, no, you can't do the parking lot expansion to protect a few plants when it meant 400 jobs at that time. But the ideal world for us, so we tried to come up with some mitigation to survive those plants. But the tweak we did in legislature is to come up with an economic value for those plants so that we could establish them somewhere else where we don't have to deal with this encroaching. I probably not answering all your specifics, Paul, but I'm happy to talk with you over real specifics. But we've done this before. Twin State Gravel Company is one that I can recall just recently, down along the Connecticut River, I think near White River Junction area. They ended up, due to their activities there and nearby, the deer yard kind of got just trashed. So we went there and we said, half of your property is still good functioning deer wintering habitat. So let's keep that protected in the agreement, but let's give us this amount of money. And then I think we went and reinvested it elsewhere. I think actually we might have used the money over in the Castleton area for the Bird's Eye expansion, where we had the ability through all different combination of donations and money to acquire over 3,000 acres. And knowing the significance of that property for connectivity, for animal movement from New York through to Vermont and up north, and just give us flexibility, Paul, and we have lots of different tools. And I think if there's other questions you might have in terms of how the agency approaches this, Becca's here, and I think she could address those real well. But it's a fairly it's complicated in a way, to be honest with you, and it's not just you telling us about a great piece of property, or we have a lot of people come to us and they want to have our property in the hands of the department. And it's the hardest thing to do is communicate with them. Well, you know, we can't do it that easily if it doesn't fit our criteria. You know, obviously we don't want to keep fragmented pieces of land all over the place. You just can't manage that way. Vermont Conservation Design has been a tremendous tool to help us identify our priorities from the bigger scale picture. I'm leaving a big piece out, Becca, that we should share with them.
I don't think so. I think FPR is in a similar position where, you know, we have to be really thoughtful about what acquisition opportunities we take advantage of, because we also, you know, are really thoughtful about the ability to actually take care of that land. We have 360,000 plus acres of land we own. We have 140,000 plus acres in conservation easement. We have 2 licensed land surveyors and 2 survey technicians to maintain all of those hundreds of miles of boundary. We don't have enough foresters to do the work of helping on wildlife management, area management. But we do have interdisciplinary teams in each part of the state that help us review acquisition opportunities and provide input in, like, yes, this is a great idea for state ownership, or this is a great idea for land protection, but maybe we should hold it as an easement. So our land conservation staff bring all of those opportunities to those district stewardship teams. And then after that, based on those recommendations, we'll decide whether we want to seek guidance from the commissioners about, like, yes, we should begin to have conversations with partners. Most of the time we're working with a conservation partner to try and get a project done. Sometimes they can buy and hold for us. Other times they can offer technical expertise, or simply, in the most instances, they just move faster than we can move. But we have the ability to bring in LWCF dollars. Fish and Wildlife has dollars they can bring to the table. So while we have sort of a longer drawn out process, we do have access to money, and in partnership with conservation organizations, we can often make those most important projects happen. And then there's the Federal Forest Legacy Program that Mark was referencing. We think right now probably have about $18 million in active projects in the state of Vermont, protecting land through that program. We require public access for recreation, and that means for all recreation. And when I say all recreation, I mean we do not allow limitations on hunting, fishing, and trapping. That's something that comes to us with some frequency. You know, oh, we don't really know about trapping, and we remain unified with Fish and Wildlife that that's an important thing for us to maintain. We also have the ability through the Forest Legacy Program, even though it's billed as sort of a working forest program nationally, it's really about keeping forests as forests. So we can put special treatment areas in EPZs, all of the things that allow us to protect particular natural communities or habitats that are of particular importance. So we have some pretty exciting projects that have happened on the landscape here in Vermont as a result of that funding, and look forward to continuing to have that happen. Just this past year, with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, $700 million is going to the Federal Forest Legacy Program that needs to be committed by fiscal year 27 in order to be fully expended by the end of September in 2031. And the categories of funding for that, they haven't rolled out the specific description of how we can tap into that money, but they're creating different categories. It doesn't have to go through Congress, so it can go a lot faster. And they're looking at keystone projects, like big, magnificent projects that maybe we've been wanting to do for a really long time. Family forests, so we expect those to be smaller in scale, where Typically for Vermont, we have to be putting forward pretty big projects in order to be competitive at the national scale. And this category might allow us to look at protection of some smaller parcels. And then a third one that I think is really fascinating and likely to get some traction here in Vermont are lands with a tribal focus. So while a tribe would not be able to be to receive funding to be the owner of a project, we could say work with Vermont Land Trust. Vermont Land Trust might acquire a piece of land, convey it to a tribal organization here in Vermont and hold a conservation easement. And this pot of funding that the Forest Service is talking about designing would allow us to do that in ways with money that we really haven't been able to do here in Vermont. So we're looking forward to getting some more of those details to better understand what our opportunities are in Vermont. We've met with conservation organizations. We've met with the Housing and Conservation Board just to be prepared to fully take advantage of as much of that 700 million as we can. So that's sort of quick and dirty of where we're at with conservation, but certainly happy to take more questions or talk more specifically about projects or ideas offline.
Forest Service is a big player too. So one of the first things I look at is if the piece of land that comes to us, and I see it's within their proclamation boundary, that's where we have that discussion first. So they've got a lot of money. They've actually got money now from their timber sales to do wildlife habitat improvement too, which is a real plus for us. But I will say, how do we even get there in some projects? It's people like you, Paul, or others who come to us and say, hey, look, I think I got a lead on this property that I think really should be in wildlife hands. Then we throw it to the district stewardship team or some of us to look at it in the agency. But Lazy Lady is an example in Lake Champlain off the Georgia shore. And we just closed on purchasing that 4-acre island. It just happened how somehow by circumstance, we couldn't track down the landowner for several years to deal with managing the cormorant issue because we couldn't do anything. The towns were after us all the time. Everybody, it was one of my nightmares every time I get a call. I said, well, yeah, we'd like to do something, but it's not state property. And we can't do anything because we're restricted too. We can't do any open water control of cormorants. Anyways, long story short, I won't get into the weeds of that. But anyways, we just closed on it. It's awesome. Come to find out, the family finally, somehow we got a connection. Oh, I know it was that the granddaughter of the owner works for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, not in wildlife and conservation. Somehow through her, one young lady, fairly young, got a hold of me, somehow got my title and we got talking. Wow, my ears perked up quick. And then happened to be the person who was charged of the estate lived in Michigan, avid outdoorsman, real angler, duck hunter, everything, you name it. And the problem they had of the 6 siblings who were to get the money, 3 of them needed money right away, as much as they could get. But the other 3, luckily 2 of the 3 I was dealing with had conservation value first. So we were able to, I think, get that property for about between $500,000 and $600,000, which I gotta tell you, that got out in the market today, the way land is gone. Yeah. Someone would buy that for millions sight unseen to have their own private island to do on Champlain. So that's how those good things happen. That's the same way it happened from a Fish and Wildlife Board member about the Castleton property, over 3,000 acres, and a couple of hunters that I knew from way back came to me and they hunted the guy's property because, the guy sits up there, he has nothing to do. He made his money in computers. He's a millionaire. He lets us go out and hunt there. Money's no object to him. He says, you ought to meet this guy, and I got him to help with the conservation camps at Keogh, but he funneled his money out through the Middlebury Foundation, there to make it easy for management. But millions we got from him and others to buy over 3,500 acres or more to add to our existing wildlife management. So that's how it happens. It is, we got our targeted areas. Right now, we're very struggling hard to try to find land to use from the Deerfield mitigation money. I think we still got, they don't quote me these figures. I get so much of this stuff on my mind, but we got significant money. I think it's around 600,000 or 700,000 still left that we gotta get off the books. That for the wind power down in the southern part of the state there, that's on the Forest Service land for Iberdola, that was the settlement we made. But we're struggling to find land that we feel is comfortable as bear habitat. That's the condition we have, the chunk of land. But so I actually hired Frostback, our bear project leader, when he retired, I said, look, why don't we just hire him back as a seasonal? And the only thing I wanted to do is knock on people's doors and figure out a way that we can find the right person. And I think we're getting close to somebody near Okemo that maybe we might be able to invest some money in. That's, it's a small state. It's amazing how things.
Could I just add something to what
Oh, yeah.
Rick has said? Just a bit of a historical perspective. I'm probably going back 15 or 20 years, so I know things have changed. But I was on the Land Acquisition Review Committee at that point. And, you know, I totally sympathize with what you're saying about, you know, lack of staff to maintain state properties. But at that time, one of the primary considerations for adding to state land was proximity to existing state land.
Yeah.
And what that did was perpetuate past mistakes in a sense, because a lot of our holdings were like high elevation, less productive lands. We didn't want, the more diverse properties because they were, down low and could be used for other purposes. So typically it was like these less diverse, high elevation properties. So that's where we were like adding properties. And when some, really, a significant natural community at lower elevation came available, people would say, oh, we don't have any other state land there, so we can't take this on.
Yeah.
And I hope we've moved beyond that point.
Yeah.
And we realize
I'm
that-
happy to say we have.
Okay, good, good. I just want, I'm relieved. Thank you.
The interesting thing, and I'll just, because it's helpful context, especially having you bring that up, that the tension point between continuing to acquire land that's really practical and important for public ownership with the balance point of having the capacity to manage it responsibly is something that our secretary is paying increasing attention to, and actually declined to approve us moving forward with a project recently that we had a strong interest in adding to our portfolio. So we are finding
For
our
what reason?
because of the really what we're in a position to figure out, how do we pay for the short-term and the long-term expenses associated with maintaining a property. And this was one that we saw a lot of potential for, and the secretary at the end of the day said, this is just too expensive for us. So I bring up that point of really needing to always be considerate of that tension point, because it is real. It's something that the secretary tries to be successful with when she advocates for resources for our agency at the legislature, but we don't want anybody to tell us to stop acquiring land
It should
either.
be a consideration, but not the primary consideration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not, but we have several criteria, including the old one that you have. But I gotta tell you.
Yeah, back in the day. it
I'm
was
actually
like
glad,
the
we
prime-
had
one
that,
of the
because now we're
primary
finding out
criteria.
people like me who were trained as a forester, wildlife habitat biologist, now I'm realizing, I probably would say, I don't know, why are we buying that? It doesn't have much wildlife habitat value from my perspective. Now we're finding out it does due to, forest cover, connectivity, ever since VCDs kicked in, it's given us a whole new lens, which we didn't have when we bought property back. But most of the properties we acquired were back when Ned Geo was commissioner, when the department was flush with money. We had double the number of deer hunters. We were the market to come for non-residents to deer hunt, and that was bread and butter. And in a way, he was a restaurant owner. He wasn't anyone that, but he liked the outdoors. We had quite a vision, is to buy wherever's available. And that we didn't have to go through all these processes that we do today buying land. And that's why we were probably the envy of a lot of states of all the public voting access areas. You can't touch one of those today. Back then, we had enough vision. We got a few headaches with a few of them. His neighbor's right next to it. But anyway, it's a good.
An aside, I met the Hankies maybe 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I did with Chris Frimmer. So the Hankies owned Lazy Lady.
Yeah.
It was an older couple that owned Lazy Lady, and we went over, and it was amazingly big, huge trees, well kept. And I'd love to go into that camp because I bet you it is like frozen in time. There's a small little camp there.
Yeah, we're gonna. It's got to laugh at it a little bit. We're gonna take it down. But
yeah.
I should talk to you a little bit, Mark, because one of the things I told them is we can cement their family legacy if you come to us, so I got to still work that through with staff, that we'll do some kind of monument there in recognition.
Yeah, and it's right.
And that just resonated with some of the grandchildren there. So
Yeah, it's right next to Rock Island. So I've been looking at Lazy Lady, which is Tern Nesting Island for years and have seen it go from
Interesting.
stage to stage.
Put it in.
They put a little dent.
Now we can do something with that.
Unless the Eagles show up, but that's.
Question here, Alan.
Oh, yeah. Just another quick follow-up on the mitigation banking topic, with the updates to the teeny statutes. You got fees for takings of plants, but my understanding is the funds from those takings go back into general fund. They don't actually, is that incorrect?
No, that's incorrect.
Dedicated.
Okay, that's great.
So that, in one of the more recent, updates to the endangered species statutes, that was clearly defined as it will go into a certain account. To the endangered species account.
Okay.
And
That's
then
great.
we try and keep a track of that and say, how much is going in for plants, so let's focus that on plants.
Great.
Yeah, I think we sort of have to.
Yeah, whether we have to spend it on the same exact plant.
No, we have
No.
broader flexibility now.
It needs to go to.
And we can also do some conditionals too, and also go beyond the financial back. Which is folks on this, which is the way.
Well, I had a follow-up question about personnel. I was surprised to see that the bird biologist is advertised as limited service.
It's always been that way for a long time.
Really?
I made
guess I wasn't.
the switch only because we're submitted in limited
So there's
service.
not a classified position.
Well, it has all the benefits for classified position. The only hint is we have two different people here. I'll try to go a very broad scenario. When we hire people where we have to have approval from legislature on position numbers in the governor's office to get it. And then limited service doesn't have to go through that process. We have to get authorization through the budget to have these people. We said if they don't look that close at those things. So, but there's still like 4 or 5 levels we got to get approval for limited service. But the limited service position person, we hire them as you wouldn't know them from a permanent terms of the other benefits. They get all the same benefits of vacation time, where seasonals don't. And you are seasonal, maybe at one time you get nothing. You don't get any holiday pay, or they get a little bit accrued sick leave now, but it's peanuts. Long story short, you do that, we usually ask for 3-year blocks for limited service positions when we go through with Fish and Wildlife. So if you could go up 1 to 3 years, how long are they going to do? At the 3rd year, before then, you can ask for approval to extend it for another 3 years. The key part is you have to have unique funds to support the position. So in the bird world, I say we're always going to have unique funds to do it from the donations of all of our partners that we work with, between Audubon and BCE, all these folks who we funnel the grants through. We are in no trouble with match, so that's secure. It's always going to be there. If we don't have to dip into our state funds, so we can use that and the PR, Pittman Robertson funds, the federal grants we get. And at the time, a few years ago, it was called the bump. We got a whole bunch more money. And that was looked as an enhancement of funds, and then it's even getting bigger. So the trade-offs we did at the time, it was a decision that I made, but I did consult with people. Is when John Buck retired, I took his position, which was permanent, as you call,
right,
from previously being the deer project leader and then the bird person. Is I switched it to our bionutrition research manager position, which we hired as limited service back when we got the PR pump. Reason I did that is I felt that position with politics was most vulnerable to get cut, not the bird position. So it's just, it's just the way that the cloud is. Now many people here, what researcher in state government? Well, no, what are you doing paying? So that was a decision I made. And once I found out how valuable that position was and how neat through all our whole programs. So
Doug Moran's always been limited. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Nobody really knows, except I've got to know, and the business office has to know, because I've got to make sure every 3 years we up it. Hey, I saw you had on here, and I tried to be brief, Alan. And I think we're getting behind schedule, unfortunately. So I apologize.
A couple questions.
New ESC member update, just real quick. Not quite there yet. I personally have reached out to 3 people. You can't do it 3 at the same time. It's like you, when I reached out to you, I think I finally got you on a year later. That's all. It's not from us trying. It's just it's a lengthy process. You know, you reach out to someone, you're available, explain what it is, go back, and I don't want to rush them. I want them to think it through. Get back to me if you want. And then if get that green light, then I've got to go up through, you know, our commissioner and secretary's appointee, but I'm doing that work on their behalf. And sometimes I got to rely on staff too to get input to do it. With this one, I've had 3 people, 2 that retired that I thought would have been awesome. And I also am consulting with Forest and Parks because I feel it's a silvicultural related position. It has to be. So that's, it struck out on 3. Oh, everybody was flattered. They were asked. One said if they weren't in a situation of where they were so busy. But I think we all know, some people in this room are in the same hat. The good people who are active and volunteer are really busy people. And those are the people you hope to get. So that's where we are. I'm back to the drawing board. I just got word. So I've got 2 good names. One that Jim is, I've looked through all the names that Jim has, talked with Keith Thompson, Forest and Parks to process those. Before that with Mike Snyder. So, and then the secretary actually sent me a name yesterday when I was briefing her on a few things. And I said, boy, yeah, that person would be awesome. I just got to make sure that this lady fits the silvicultural hat. That's all.
Okay.
So that's where we are. Takes time. I think hopefully we'll get there quicker than we did some of the other appointments. The plan.
Yeah. Let's, you know, if you can keep us posted, like if you run out of names, you know, it'd be great. You know, or I think April's the next meeting. It'd be really nice to have some.
I thought I didn't bet. I would have bet we would have had somebody for this meeting on that one. It was much more. We had a lot more names. You know, you or Jim has provided me a whole list of different names, and I've gone over it. Met with FDR, met with Joe.
Yep.
It should not be this difficult. It just takes time.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
Updates on the red eared slider status. Our staff went back, looked at it. I asked them also, though, let's do a comprehensive take of the entire list that we have of critters we don't want here in this state imported or possessed at all. And Luke Groff and Roz and staff, and we have a importation team and met with law enforcement and folks, and they produced an excellent memo to the commissioner that got to him in late December. So it's just been over the holidays, legislature being his focus, and then being ramped up every which way. We haven't had a time to follow up with him to say, look, but I did. Catherine did have a dialogue with him the other day on this, and he's aware. His first concerns, which I knew would be, well, wait a minute, what's the ramifications to this, you know, to citizens of state of Vermont and individual people and so forth. And that's what I probably didn't adequately address to folks like here, that when we try to do these things, they may seem simple. They're not. They take it. There's a lot of, I hate to use the word unintended consequences. Everybody looks to throw that, but we have to think through all those things. We work for everybody in the state of Vermont. And John Cart, it takes a lot of staff time, to be honest with you, to do something as simple as to take a species like the red slider and say, folks, you can't have them. We can easily argue the ecological need to do that and healthy, but beyond that, it is really tough, because when people already have these things in possession, how do you craft, you know, language and grandfather them or not, and what do you do when new ones come aboard, and you know, when you pick up a pet from somebody like a red slider, pretty hard for me to sit there and talk with the press on the front page article if we decide to put it down without you know, thinking it all through. So John prepared just a couple things. I thought I'm glad he's here this morning. I think it'd be helpful to this committee to hear a few things that you're thinking through, because exactly with the commission, what's our communications plan? How are we going to reach out to all these folks? And you thought this through with Luke and others. Can you quickly share those, and then we can go whatever, if that's okay with you folks.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I think we all agree that, you know, red-eared sliders, or just a slider in general, it's not a species we want inhabiting Vermont. But, you know, being the most popular turtle pet for decades, you know, there's probably a lot in the state. We have no idea how many are here. So just at the start, changing the designation was recommended by the ESC from an unrestricted species to restricted. just the first layer of bureaucracy is our importation laws don't necessarily allow for grandfathering. So we would have to, if we follow our current guidelines, we'd have to issue a permit to every individual that has a turtle. We'd also have to find some way of identifying all those turtles so that people aren't swapping new ones in. So how would we handle all that? Or a couple pieces to that. There are probably a lot of people that can't wait to get rid of the turtles that they got a few years ago and realize that they're bored with. So what will we do with turtles that get turned into us or just abandoned? So we need to try and figure out some of those policies, figure out where the money might come from to house them. And so so those are a couple major sort of layers of stuff we got to figure out. We could certainly use some help, finding out how other states have handled this. We've heard a few horror stories about what happens when states get, like Massachusetts got inundated with people turning in turtles, and other, when they had an amnesty day. But figure out which states have policies that work, have outreach and information materials that would help. Figuring out which holes not to blunder into would be really helpful right now. So I think those are the starting levels starting steps for figuring out how to actually implement a ban on them. Separate from that, I think another request was identify or listing the species as an aquatic nuisance species. That's under a DEC regulation, would require a statutory change. The way that DEC's aquatic nuisance species laws are written, they'd actually have to update the statute itself. There's not it doesn't just refer to a list that the secretary can add things to. So there's that layer of things, and DEC isn't necessarily ready to invest the energy into updating the statute just for that one species. That their aquatic invasive species group is understaffed, and they'd probably like to do it as part of a bigger change whenever they have the demand and energy for that. How's that for a first bit of an update?
Go for it, Jim.
Yeah, it was a learning process for us in the SAG too, to hear about the variety of different channels and mechanisms of state government that would be involved in order to follow through with the requests that we had. I wonder, is there any way to deal with strictly importation and sale, and just limit that, even if it wasn't dealing with possession, but just no more importation and sale within the state? I mean, can you go at it that way? Would that possibly streamline your efforts?
And on the surface, that seems like a good idea and the easiest. Not the preferred route, probably, mostly from law enforcement people. Where we've had those type of conditions in the past. They find it difficult to deal with it with people that have them in possession already, trying to prove where they came from or how. So it's in order to make this really work, we've got to do it so it gives the warden services some solid ground to move when we want to move, at the case. And usually it is those people, Jim. It's the commercial importation folks, but there's a lot of ways to. That's why we're going with them.
We've been trying to get our. It's always getting some time from wardens is often tight, but we're trying to get them to go. At least a couple of them that work on importation and animal possession to go and meet with Vermont pet-based pet stores to try and figure out how many might be flowing through those stores on a regular basis, how many, how much they might in the way of pet food for turtles they might be selling, just to get an idea how many are out there. But, I could order online, a bucket full of sliders and actually some soft shell turtles and spotted turtles, and have them shipped, in a box and being shipped before this meeting is over. So just saying you can't sell them in Vermont, could help, but it'd probably be confusing. And then we'd get the public saying, are you banning my turtle? Or are you gonna be coming to get it? So we kind of need to figure out a broader approach and again, have the information materials out there to try and get ahead of any of the rumors that might undercut our credibility and faith that we're doing this in the best interest of Vermont's wildlife.
So, so if either of you guys want to circle back to the SAGs and ask us to questions or to gather additional information, I think we'd certainly be willing to do that to try to, we appreciate the work that you guys are doing, the effort you guys are putting into this. But if we can help in any way, please do circle back to us, and we could try to use our network of communications and resources as best we can.
Music to my ears, Jim. Thank you.
That'll most likely be needed, Jim. And
Yeah.
Luke is part of your group, the SAG and others. So that's all these things that now staff are going to have to figure out how to find some time. That means some other things you're going to have to get not done that we think is important and critical to deal with a communications plan and implementations, operating, how we're going to handle all the pet trade story. And there's a lot to this. Because when you talk about importation ban, you're also talking about possession. And we don't really feel we separate the two. But anyways, and most likely if the SAG members somehow can sort through with some staff time to help in some of these areas, that's probably going to be the only way we're going to be successful. Way too much for us to handle, that's for sure.
Sure. So, getting back to us with any sort of specific questions you have or any specific areas that we can help with, if you can do that, go ahead and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you. Can you folks also, Jim, look at the current list of species that are on that list of banned for possession? What do we call them, John?
We have restricted and unrestricted wildlife lists.
Yeah, that would be helpful because it would really be nice that we all of a sudden aren't sitting here 2 years from now. Oh, what about this one here? Why didn't we put it in with the red slider at the same time?
Well, if John can send that, John, can you send that list to me?
Yep. I will do that.
Okay.
Send it to everyone.
Yeah.
To the whole ESC.
Mhm. Yeah, we'd love to know how many of those animals you guys have in your living rooms.
Yeah, my living room's full of
Doesn't Steve have space to take all those red
feral
sliders?
pigs.
Yeah. Wondering where they were.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention the agency, and this sounds very complicated, so I appreciate this issue being very complicated. So I'm not providing a solution, just merely a suggestion. The Agency of Agriculture registers feed products, and we work with pet stores, and we work with online retailers, in fact, to ensure that they're not selling things that aren't registered in our state. So it's a little different. I understand that the regulatory authority is different, but we've had some success reaching out to online retailers and making sure that they put on their website that they do not sell into the state of Vermont pet foods that are otherwise not registered with us. But we do have a penalty, like we again, different regulatory authority, but I just wanted to share that. And that's based on pet food manufacturers, of course, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about pet dealers. But I just wanted to share that. So and again, I totally appreciate that this is very complicated, but I wanted to share that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks.
That's great to hear. Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Okay, I think we're gonna move on. I appreciate the conversation and thanks for the updates, Mark. Great to hear what you guys are working on this year.
Alan,
Yeah.
just a quick question. John said you want to change the agenda and move some of the T&E permits to this morning. Is that correct?
I was hoping to. I was going to shoot for, we're still, we're losing time, but looking for starting at 10:45 for I was gonna try to do the next 2 agenda items and then do permits.
You wanted to do both the plant permits?
I think, I mean, it's
Well,
rhodiola.
the reason
Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
bringing this up, and that's fine with me, but I think one of the applicants wanted to be present.
Okay.
This is a public meeting, so
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I can quick email her and see. I mean, I don't know if we can just change the agenda.
Was it the rhodiola?
No, it was
Okay.
the prune.
No, I think then maybe we can just do the rhodiola then. How about that? And then we can.
Yeah,
stick
I
with
mean,
it.
I could run out and ask Catherine quick if it's a legal issue, if we change the agenda, if somebody wanted to attend.
Well, like I said, if the applicant for the rhodiola was
Yeah.
not planning on attending, then I
To
think.
my knowledge, they weren't.
Let's just switch that one. So,
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
Okay, awesome. All right, next up is the vote on creation of new SAGs. And I don't know, drop the ball, I guess, the easiest way to put it. We had a conversation and at the last ESC meeting, and I think we basically sort of hashed everything out, went through a lot of questions. We had presentations from Dorothy Allard and Savannah Fiera on the creation of a fungi and a bryophyte SAG. I think it was essentially Stephanie, you being new to the committee, and I think that maybe Becca wasn't here at the last meeting either, and so we decided we'd give you two a chance to go back and talk to folks in your agencies. And I was going to do an electronic vote and never got around to it. So here we are. And Savannah is online. Matt is here to answer any bryophyte questions, but I will open it up for, any additional comments, questions, concerns before we go for a vote.
So I'll just add, I did get a chance to talk to the commissioner and he shared the same concerns with me that Roz and I shared. That this point, we don't support it, but that's just one vote that we have here.
Yeah. Yeah, and I my hope is, and I get it. I was gonna ask some questions about, people power at Fish and Wildlife, but I think also just in terms of, the work plan that they put forward, that at least, looking at the next, 2 to 3 years, a lot of this is really sort of information gathering, trying to get status, updating, S1 rankings, really understanding some of the, abundance and distribution of some of these species. So hopefully that, at least in the short term, this is not going to be leading to, new listing proposals or critical habitat proposals, that sort of thing. So,
but to be clear, our staff that work in that area already have authorization to do that.
Yeah.
It's an important part of their work.
Yeah.
So that's why I just don't understand the need for this at this stage until they get to what you just talked about. Then, yeah, maybe perhaps if another committee can deal with it. But that's all right. We discussed that in the last meeting, if people recall.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I just wanted to say the same thing I did at the last meeting, which if we have an opportunity here to get additional information from a bunch of experts and enthusiasts that otherwise would not be available to us, I think we got to look at it that way, that this is an opportunity for additional person power and information, and whether or not we act on it a lot, or the ESC acts on it, or the state acts on it, at least we get these people out there gathering this information for us and sending it our way. I think it's I think it's an opportunity, and personally, I think it's a great idea. I think I would like to see the ESC support it.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Any other comments? Carla?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I would just echo what Jim just mentioned, thinking about the conversation from a few minutes ago of finding a new ESC member, and it's hard to find people that are showing up and contributing. And this seems like an opportunity of people wanting to show up and contribute.
Thanks, Carla. Paul?
Muted, Paul.
Muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I would echo both those comments and maybe just add the fact that the committee can really act as a filter to sort of, take that information and do with it as we may, with the understanding that we realize the limitations that exist within the department to, come up with whatever recovery plan or something that might, need to happen. So, Brian, is that your phone?
Yeah, sorry. I have no idea why it's ringing. It's off.
Probably your broker. So anyway, yeah, I just, I understand what what you guys are saying at the department level. But again, it is just a sort of information. It's worth listening to. It's worth encouraging folks to be looking at this stuff, and the fact that there are people that really, are willing to do that. I think we should encourage it. But again, we really, our job as the committee is to just kind of act as a filter and decide how, far these things bubble up to the top of the priority list. So, yeah, so I'm probably going to support it. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I'm going to call the question here. With the department's concerns duly noted, I will nevertheless make a motion that we create both of these SAGs. These are underappreciated, long underappreciated tax that deserve our respect and attention. So I'll make a motion that we create those SAGs.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Thanks, Carla. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll call the vote. All those in favor of creating two new SAGs, bryophyte and fungi, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Yeah.
And abstentions?
The agency opposes along with Fish and Wildlife.
All right, thanks for that, Stephanie. So, yeah, motion passes 5-2. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Savannah. I'll be in touch with you and Dorothy and provide some updates and get you up to speed on ESC related matters. So thanks everyone for entertaining this. I appreciate it. I think it's been a great conversation and really great to hear the enthusiasm about these two taxa. So thanks so much. All right. So I just I wanted to bring up the Sally Laughlin Award. We have I think just kind of been late in terms of getting information out, calling for nominations, getting the word out in terms of looking for folks who might be suitable candidates for this. I think, as I recall, and we basically, I think, lost Liz and Alan, who were our members of the Education and Outreach Committee. So I'm sort of, I think, right now, basically the only member of that committee. But I'd love to hear some thoughts about getting the word out. I think we have one or maybe two nominations in the hopper from past years, but just kind of thinking about ways that we might interface with our networks and think about who might be some good candidates for nominating for this next year. We have been awarding this at Dead Creek Days in early October, so it would be nice to probably not wait till our September meeting to have a conversation about this. If we can do it in April or do it electronically over the summer, that would be great. But I think it's been a challenge to kind of have these decisions go down to the wire and trying to figure out if our awardee can make it to Dead Creek Days to a week and a half before it actually happens. So I don't know. I'll just open it up for a conversation, but I'd love to have this, maybe go to the SAGs, have the SAGs think about who they might be interested in nominating. We do look for a nomination letter, and then I think the final decision is up to the Endangered Species Committee. But love to just think about ways to get the word out and kind of expand the list of folks who might be considered for this award. Jim?
Yeah, I think in the past, I think most of the nominations have really come from the SAGs, and I think that's a starting point. I think, though, if the basic information about the award was sent to the SAGs and we were asked to also forward it to other organizations that might have nominations, we certainly could do that. I don't think there's a lot, but there's a handful at least of other organizations out there. I mean, VCE comes to mind, Audubon comes to mind, that we could send this information to and ask for additional nominations. As you know, I also think that this is an opportunity for Fish and Wildlife PR. And the more we get on this award out in the media, the more we might generate awards in future years or nominations in future years as more and more people hear about this. I still don't think we're getting a lot of information out there about that, and I'd like to see Fish and Wildlife showcase some of their efforts on endangered species and the people that are putting in the time. So additional press, I think, would help, and then maybe asking all the SAGs, sending information to the SAGs, or maybe you could send it just directly from ESC to some of these other organizations that are involved in conservation, like Audubon and VCE.
Yeah, that's helpful, Jim. I think the one, there's a little bit of a issue, I think, in the PR if we want to keep this a surprise. I guess in terms of, like, it'd be great to use it as a way to sort of advertise Dead Creek Days, but if no one knows really about the award and we don't want to spill the beans on who the actual awardee is, then we end up with a I don't know, like, come and see who the next Sally Laughlin Award winner is, and no one really knows exactly what that is. So I don't know. Think about it, Jim. I totally agree. It's a great opportunity for PR, but it would be nice to also have it in terms of boosting attendance at Dead Creek Days as well.
Well, you could do it in two stages, Alan. I mean, the first stage would be to get nominations and to get those into to the secretary and to Fish and Wildlife and to the Endangered Species Committee. And then if that decision was made, let's say a month in advance of Dead Creek, then that would be stage two, then put that information out publicly.
Yeah. Okay. Brian?
I'll just push back a little on Jim's idea of extending it out to other conservation groups. And I actually think we could expedite this. There's probably enough names in our heads right now, and maybe just do it the way we have been doing it. Even we could probably come up with a half dozen names now, or even 3 more to add to the names that are in the hopper, that would keep us busy for the next 6 years. You know, we'd have a bunch of worthy candidates. I really think we could do it on our own fairly quickly internally. I mean, it is an award, you know, Sally, you know, I think it's a creature of the Endangered Species Committee, this award, and we might as well just come up with names. Shoot, there are people in this room right now that I would nominate, or in that room where you are. So that's my 2 cents on this.
Yeah, I think the restriction is it can't be department employees and it can't be members of the scientific advisory group. So that means you're nominating Mark Labar.
Right. Well,
so
yeah.
So the secret, you spilled the beans.
I'll second that nomination.
Yeah, I might even take issue with that rule, you know, like there's no reason that Jim Andrews shouldn't be nominated, you know? So anyway, you know, if we need a new little committee to come up with names, or we could even do it now. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I'd be happy. I mean, we are still a couple minutes ahead of schedule if folks want to give names. I mean, obviously, we know somebody down at VCE recently retired. So
Just
go ahead,
note
Rod.
that this whole thing is recorded and shared on a public website.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah. Which I guess I'm gonna say I'm not gonna worry about in terms of nominations. Yeah.
These are rapidly.
That is a very good one right there.
Yeah.
I mean, Chris is certainly,
Yeah.
not only has Chris done his share of the work, but he's certainly mentored a slew of other individuals over his years, myself included.
Yeah. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I was just, again, I'm going to play the new person card. I'm trying to understand obviously we're celebrating an individual who's contributed to conservation and or endangered species work, or, you know, and I don't have the description in front of me, and I'll apologize for not doing work before I came to the meeting. But if folks were, if also the other goal is to get folks to go to the public, to go to the Dead Creek Days, you know, opening this up, I'm going to agree with Jim, opening this up to the public does generate a little bit of excitement and allowing individual, and I actually maybe broader than VCE or Audubon, generating excitement about the nomination and the 2-step process. The big reveal on the day could draw more people to the event of Dead Creek Days and the celebration of the individual that ultimately gets nominated. But it does require work. It does require nomination forms. It does require outreach. And so there's always that resource piece as well. So
We could do it like the Great British Baking Show. Star conservation, everybody sitting in a row in chairs. And for those of you that watch the Great British Baking Show, you know what I'm talking about.
Stephanie, just to clarify, I mean, are you kind of saying like we should have a press release saying we're calling for nominations for the Sally Laughlin Award?
Yes, that's a suggestion. Calling for nominations,
Okay,
having
yeah.
a nomination process, getting the public involved, generating excitement, and talking about who you're honoring, Sally Laughlin, as well as the individual in that given year.
That's a lot of work for you, Al, being the only one on the outreach committee to review nominations. So we're
I got plenty of time.
50 to come in or something like that.
Well, I mean, it is, I mean, let's face it, it's a niche, it's niche work, endangered and threatened species. So, I mean, you know, the way that I just put it in the chat, Sally Laughlin Award for the Conservation of Endangered and Threatened Species, based on recommendations from Vermont Endangered Species Committee. The award is given to a person who has shown leadership in advancing knowledge, understanding, and conservation of threatened and endangered species and their habitats in Vermont. there's just, there's just not that many folks. So, yeah. Paul, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Well, just in terms of a person to nominate, I guess I was thinking along similar lines to some other folks with Chris Rimmer and being a, a stellar candidate for this award.
Yeah.
I mean, he's, you can't say enough good things about what he's done for conservation in this state, and plus his relationship with Sally. I think it would be awesome if that happened, sooner rather than later, just because of people's age and whatnot. But yeah, so the Roz, you can sort of like somehow black that out, so nobody knows about it.
Well, it's a nomination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Hey, Chris, there's an 8-hour recording we'd like you to listen to. There's something hidden in there for you.
Yeah. I'm
No,
gonna
I
see
mean,
him-
Retired, Chris is retired now. He's got the time.
Yeah.
Brian, did you want to add something?
Yeah, this is a no-brainer for me who it should go to this year. And as much as I think we need not to give this award to retired white guys who've worked in with vertebrates, Chris is outstanding and deserves this award at some point. And I really would love to diversify the award and see it go to a botanist or someone who's working in other taxa that, that typically don't get as much attention. But yeah, I just think I can't think of anyone other than Chris to get this award this year because he's retired now.
and technically he is has stepped down from the STAG. Emeritus.
SAG members are fine. SAG
okay.
members are eligible. So Kent has won, Jim has won. So SAG members are eligible. I guess, emeritus ESC members also. So I would, I think putting, Liz's name in the hat would also be a good candidate.
Absolutely. Liz was my other choice.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, this is helpful. And I've got enough to run with. I will definitely send something out to the SAGs. And maybe I may think about other conservation groups as well. Just to kind of expand the audience. So are those remnant hands, Paul, or did you have something else you want to add? Brian as well.
I'm good.
Oh, you're muted, Paul.
Sorry. In terms of the process, do we have to make a motion to nominate someone at this point if we wanted to do that? How do we do
We
it?
actually have to get a nomination letter, I think, is the process. So, I mean, I think we would vote, but we would vote on letters of nomination that we receive from, either someone on the committee, a SAG, or even a member of the public.
Okay. So you need to put the word out there first before that happens? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
Look like that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Nope. Agreed. Okay, I'm gonna move on here. Let's do rhodiola. What is the common name? Roseroot, okay.
Viola, it sounds like burr.
Are you good to lead this?
Yeah.
Bob? Okay, thanks.
I guess I don't know if we need to share this.
I'll try. I'll see if I can share it.
I mean, it's presumably everybody's seen it or had opportunity to see it.
Mhm. I've got the, let's see here. Let's see, maybe this one. How's that look?
Yeah,
So this is the flora advice on the basically cultivating rosewood.
so just to summarize this quickly, you folks have seen this before, and this permit was requested about a year ago, and the Flora Advisory Group recommended denial. And we presented that to the ESC, and the ESC was less willing to outright just deny the permit outright. So we came up with two possible options. The original permit was to collect seeds from rosewood from the wild, and there's only two populations in the state. And we really balked at that, the Flora Advisory Group. So the two options that we came up with was, one was to collect seeds from Maine, where it's uncommon, but it's not rare and it's not protected in any way. And the second option was for Phil Merrick, the applicant, to obtain seeds, or rather obtain plants from the Native Plant Trust. And we've been collecting seeds from them for them, and they have seeds in the seed bank. And I contacted Native Plant Trust and they agreed to do that. So they are germinating seeds, which they do anyway, periodically. I think they try to germinate seeds every 10 years to test viability and whatnot. I think maybe it wasn't scheduled to happen for another year or two, so we're kind of pushing it forward a year or two, but it needs to be done anyway. And they're probably going to germinate more seeds than they would initially, because apparently the germination rate is pretty low for this species. So anyway, they will then provide, all they really want to do is determine if there's going to be germination, and they don't really have much of a use for the plants afterwards. So they're going to give these to Phil Merrick, and then he will plant them out. We need a permit because he wants to plant these possibly in two situations. One is a plot of land out in, I think it's Heinsberg.
Heinsberg or Starsboro, I'm forgetting now.
Yeah, one of those towns.
Over there.
Yeah, one of those, Champlain Valley towns. And, because it's essentially introducing a new population, the Flora Advisory Group, and I think maybe John agrees with this, maybe he doesn't. We thought needed a permit. In the past, when there's been any kind of attempted introduction, a permit has been required. So that would be the case here. But Merrick wants to do, rosewood is apparently very highly sought after in the herbal community for medicinal uses. And he's approaching it from a research standpoint. He claims he has no commercial interest in this. He's retired, and he's just kind of a plant dabbler, if you will. And
I believe also uses it. So I think he told us.
oh yeah, I'm sure he's a user.
So that's where some of his interest comes from.
Is he going to become a dealer? That's
Yes.
the dispensary. That's the slippery slope. So he claims he just wants to be a user. And so he wants to grow these plants for, I think, like 4 or 5 years till they get big enough, because the active component is in the roots and rhizomes. And then obviously he would destroy the plants because you need to dig up the roots and rhizomes to extract the compound. He intends to send them to a lab in Canada, where apparently most of the rosewood is grown. And that brings up a side story. most of the rosewood that's grown commercially to extract the medicinal compounds is a Siberian strain. It's the same species, but it's a different, I don't know if it's even a subspecies, maybe a different variety. And what Merrick wants to do is he's concerned that the Siberian strain might contaminate the North American strain. So he's thinking if we can prove the North American strain has these medicinal compounds, then we could just grow the North American strain. Obviously, we don't want to be harvesting it from the wild. So that's one concern. What else was I going to say? Oh, so one concern we had two concerns. We've never really issued a permit for any kind of commercial use before. And, you know, Merrick claims that's not his interest. And he actually came to a Flora Advisory Group meeting, and he certainly seems sincere. So I think we trust that. But that's not to be said that if he does show this the medicinal properties, that it may not be used commercially down the road. And so people in the Flora Advisory Group felt a little uncomfortable about issuing a permit that might have some commercial use down the road. And we thought at least maybe some conservation should benefit from that if that were to be the case in subsequent years. But I don't know how we put that in a permit. I'm looking at you, John. You don't need to answer that. The other question we had or concern is the repository for any seeds, because Merrick wants to grow these for like 3 to probably 5 years, and they are going to flower and reproduce and produce seeds. So is that something, are those seeds, are those legally protected, or can he do something with them, or, you know, do they revert back to the state? I guess that's something we were not sure of, and maybe that's a legal question for Catherine.
Going to revert back to the seed bank?
Well, that'd be the other, if we got them, we have no use for them, so we'd give them back to the
Okay.
Native Plant Trust.
Okay.
But I asked Merrick about it. I emailed him. I said, what do you intend to do with these? And he said, oh, I intend to kind of keep them and plant them, but I'm willing, that's probably going to be plenty. I'm willing to share and give some to you, give some to the Native Plant Trust. But the question is, you know, can he keep any without that being a permit condition?
Yeah. Absent Catherine here to say, well, first, we have statute gives us, 6 reasons why we can issue a permit. One is for scientific purposes. The next is to enhance the propagation or survival of a threatened or endangered species. Zoological exhibition, education, non-commercial cultural purposes. That's for Abenaki tribes, and special purposes consistent with the Federal Endangered Species Act. I don't know that any of these things that what's being talked about, even if Mr. Merrick's scientific research is how to grow this thing for medicinal purposes, I don't know that cuts it. So I don't know that we have the authority to issue a permit unless maybe this committee or the plant SAG can say, well, perhaps by developing a U.S. strain of roseroot, it could reduce the potential to impact wild populations and or stop the Siberian strain from being spread in the U.S. But so there's that piece. The second piece being the question of who owns the seed. I think that he would still be having that would be something, a condition we could put in the permit as to who owns that. I don't know why the state wouldn't say the state should still have authority over that, but we'd have to get some legal evaluation of that. Not sure, this is all new to us, so any advice or questions, concerns, fears, worries that this committee can provide would be helpful.
Or is there a need to propagate a third? I mean, you said it's in 2 locations in the state. Is there any desire to create more locations in the state?
No, No, but I mean, he's gonna destroy all the original plants, so at that point, the experiment will be done, except he'd have a repository of seeds, so he could continue growing them if he so chose and if we allowed that.
Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I've got a lot of concerns about this one, and I'm not ready to support recommendations for a permit. That was my first question. Why are we even considering it if the statute we're not clear whether the statute allows us to issue a permit for this. And then I've got just lots of problems with this proposal, holes in it, in terms of how he'll make use of the data, how he'll analyze what he's doing. He's pretty vague on how he determines success on this. So I don't know where to go other than I'm not ready to support this. I did have one question now is that we haven't touched on yet is, has there been any cultivation of the North American subspecies or variety that we're aware of done elsewhere?
I'm not sure of that, Brian. I was in touch with another researcher who is doing genetic analyses, and he's only done some preliminary work thus far, and he found very little distinction among strains from North America, but he thought he did find substantial differences between the North American strain and the Siberian strain, which kind of, is similar to what Merrick is saying, that the Siberian strain is pretty different. And that's why I guess nobody is certain that the North American strain even has the medicinal compounds, or at least in sufficient quantities to make it commercially viable.
Yep. Yeah, I saw that in the write-up. I also was wondering, I mean, is there anything that prevents him from doing this? I mean, is there anything in statute that says, you can get seeds and go grow them on your own property, on your own? I mean, there's no taking here, correct? I mean, he's not getting seeds from Vermont plants.
If he were to collect seeds from Vermont plants in the wild, that would be a violation without a permit.
Right.
He could go to Maine and collect seeds there because it's not restricted, and then grow them in Vermont. That is correct.
Without a permit.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really uncharted turf here, I think. And I don't know whether we have, I'm wondering about whether we have the resources. And look at we didn't issue a permit on pesticides and bats, and here we're debating issuing a permit on something that we may have no real jurisdiction over.
I'm sorry, I thought I heard that introduction requires a permit. So harvesting from Maine and bringing to Vermont, is that considered introduction or not?
I mean,
did I mishear? Sorry, I may have misheard.
No, that's a good question. I mean, people plant endangered plants all the time. I mean, you can go, as you can go to a lot of nurseries and get state listed plants and plant them in your garden in a horticultural setting. So I guess if Merrick were to get seeds from Maine and plant them in a horticultural setting, there'd be no permit needed. If we planted them in a natural setting, then that's kind of a gray area. That's because, and that's more by precedent. I mean, we've done some introductions from, Jacob's Ladder, Jessup's Milk Vetch come to mind, and we've always gotten a permit to do that. But, we're the state, we give ourselves a permit. Maybe we didn't need to do that. I don't know. But Matt, were you going to add something?
No, I think it is. Yeah, it is a situation it's a new situation, a new scenario, and it's testing some of these categories, because I think in terms of do we have the authority to give, grant a permit or support a permit for the scenario that John put forth. That I think that is part of the thinking, both advanced by Mr. Merrick and by flag members as well. This has the potential to preempt harvesting of our wild populations. So there's there is potential for supporting the conservation of the species through this activity. So you can make that case for it fitting, I think. Whether that's justified or not is, yeah, not entirely clear.
Paul's had his hand up.
Yeah, Paul. and then
Yeah,
Carla.
I was gonna bring up that same point, that it does sound to me like it has the potential for enhancing the population. If someone could actually really dial in the cultivation of this plant in terms of the ability to get it to a point where it actually flowers, and not putting all of that responsibility just on one entity, which would be the seed bank that you described. I mean, they've got a lot of other stuff that they're probably trying to do, and probably wouldn't spend the amount of effort that this guy is going to do to actually dial in the proper cultivation of this plant to the point where he's going to be producing maybe a lot of seed, in which case we are enhancing the protection of the species by, now instead of having, an ounce of seed in the seed bank, maybe there's 10 ounces of seed in addition to what he has. So, at some level, we have to just trust that this person is, not going to abuse the situation. It's another opportunity to understand more about, this plant. And as a horticulturist, that's kind of what we do, as gardeners, is we try to figure out the best way to grow stuff, right? And I know it's been problematic with some of the things that we brought in that are introduced, but anyway, I don't see that as being any kind of an issue. There is always the concern that if for some reason this compound became wildly popular, that you're going to have pressure on native populations. But I don't know. That's pretty far down the pike. I'm not sure I'd be too worried about that. So.
There's a whole piece here that I'm looking at, is how to cultivate rosewood for your garden and everything like
Oh,
that.
yeah,
And use of the rhizomes without destroying the whole plant. And
Wow.
that was one of the,
Yeah, it's heavily used in the herbalist community. One thing I would add, I neglected to say, this probably has a lot of similarities. It's analogous to ginseng. A lot of ginseng is now grown. It's like open grown or shade grown. Under netting and stuff. So, and that is to alleviate the pressure on harvesting wild ginseng. And I think maybe Phil Merrick is kind of moving in that direction. Like maybe we could grow this commercially, like we do ginseng, and there'd be less incentive to dig it up from the wild. That's kind of the conservation kind of focus, or nexus rather.
Aren't these wild populations in pretty inaccessible places or not? I can't remember what that cliff faces.
The wild populations in inaccessible locations.
Well, it depends how nimble you are.
Okay.
They're not easily accessible, but a young person knowing where to go could easily get there and do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
You're not going to stumble across them unless you knew where to go or were looking specifically for them.
Carla?
Yeah, thanks. I guess just a couple quick comments and then a question for John. Thinking along this analogous to ginseng train of thought. Personally, it seems hard to justify the conservation reason for issuing a permit because we don't have sort of the body of knowledge or specific examples to point to of attempted harvest of this species versus ginseng is sort of more widely recognized or known about the wild harvesting issues. So anyways, that was just sort of knocking around my head during the last few comments. Something that was talked about at the flag level that I would just mention as well is under a research proposal, a few of us noted that the applicant is not currently proposing to partner up with either a state or a federal or higher education institution, but that was just an idea that had been sort of brought up at the flag level that could help support this application. And then the question for John and thank you for ripping through the list there of the 6 purposes for the issuance of a permit. The question is under the second one, the enhance the propagation or survival of a T&E species. You mentioned that purpose is or has been used for authorizing activities by the Abenaki, and I wonder if that's just how it's always been done, and perhaps this is a new opportunity to use that purpose, or if that purpose really is just as narrow as authorizing tribal activity.
Good question. So those are actually 2 separate purposes. The enhancement of or propagation for survival of a species, the non-commercial cultural or ceremonial purposes provision is really just specific. It is in statute specific to Abenaki collection, and really it's very new, and it's only been allowed to generally to allow them to collect salvage dead birds. Hasn't been used for anything else. So the question of that piece of I've been was really leery of that the non-commercial cultural or ceremonial collection, worried that we're going to get snake handlers wanting to collect rattlesnakes or things like that, for their cultural or religious purposes. But so the statute is pretty clear. It's very specific to Abenaki peoples.
Great, thanks.
One thing I didn't mention, Carla, we had a person from the Center for Integrated Herbalism attend one of our Flora Advisory Group meetings just probably 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe longer. It was pre-COVID. And I remember her specifically saying that roseroot was very, very threatened by the collection because of its herbal uses. And that's, we specifically asked her to highlight, species that were of greatest concern. And that was near the top of the list. It was one of the ones that she thought were most threatened. So that is a concern for sure. Collection from the wild.
Stephanie?
I just wanted to make sure, so we're talking about the getting seeds. We're not talking about collection from the wild at all in this instance.
Correct.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
Okay. In the ginseng, because the agency has a ginseng rule that we apply, we actually allow people to collect from the wild. So it's a little different. I just wanted to point that out. And then the permit, the reasons for issuing a permit, again, I want to go back to, it was decided that a permit is not necessary because of there's no collection, because you wouldn't be allowed to, or you could only collect under scientific, propagation, zoological display, educational purposes, non-commercial and special purposes. So that's only for the collection in the wild. Again, I'm just I want to make sure I understand what's on the table and what we're considering here, I guess. And I apologize for rehashing this.
Well, I think and John, feel free to jump in. I think that one of the questions is, do we even have authority to grant a permit, a takings permit, because this does not seem like it falls under any of the conditions that would enable us to say, here is why we would grant one.
Correct. And tied with that would be for this person to be able to, I think, to get the seeds that are already in a repository, they would need a permit. They would need an authorized reason to get that permit. So We couldn't just say, well, there's no reason, there's no authorized purpose or what's been proposed does not meet any of the conditions where we're allowed to give a permit, and therefore you could have it without a permit is not possible.
So to collect those seeds, the Native Plant Trust needed a permit.
Correct.
And they always, contact me if anybody, if they want to use any of those seeds.
Yeah.
I mean, is it just up to me to play God and say, sure, you can give this guy the seeds? Or, I mean, where does the jurisdiction of the permit end? God, there you go.
I make a motion
Well,
that Bob.
I get some of the medicinal compounds.
Yeah.
User or dealer? Bob.
So to reiterate, because the seed bank, that in itself requires a permit to take from the seed bank, even though those seeds are in storage somewhere, it's not in the wild. Is that like succinct?
Well, that's what we're agonizing over. We need a permit to take the seeds from the wild and put them in the bank, but then you need a permit to take them out of the bank and actually utilize them.
Right, but those seeds came from, those seeds did not come from Vermont, correct?
They did.
Oh, they did. Okay, I thought they
Yeah,
were
they're
from
Vermont
Maine.
seeds from our two
Okay.
populations.
Okay, sorry.
Mark is looking at seeds on
You
Amazon.
can get a package of 10 seeds through Amazon
But I bet they're from Siberia.
for $8.97.
I bet they're the Siberian strain.
Yeah. $1 a seed.
I guess the thing that, and Brian was kind of talking about some holes in terms of this.
Shipping is probably.
I guess do we have any idea how widespread cultivation of the Siberian variety is? Because to me, it seems like there is a potential danger. If that's an unknown, there's a potential danger of, essentially genetic pollution working its way into the Vermont strain. And it seems like he's talking about, sort of a controlled situation. And maybe these, along the river in Heinsberg is far enough away from where these native populations are. But we don't know about, how far away from a Siberian population that might, it just seems like it is sort of opening up a can of worms for, potentially having genetic material enter the native populations.
Well, one of the conditions we're proposing, this is sort of the honor system, and it's also kind of a crapshoot, is they need to be planted at least a mile from any other population, including the Siberian one. Mr. Merrick, by his own admission, says he has the Siberian strain growing in his backyard.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you can't put any of the Vermont strain there, and he said, well, I would rip the Siberian ones out if he were to do that. And, I don't know that anyone's gonna inspect his backyard. It's sort of the honor system, but he seems conscientious and above board, but somebody else may not be, who knows?
So do we know
Yeah.
who pollinates this plant? Do we have any idea what the pollinator is? And how realistic is it that, if it's a bumblebee or something, it's not gonna go that far? What do we
Yeah,
know
it's
about?
probably insect pollinated. And that's why we said like at least, I think I said at least a mile. I went online and looked at recommendations. Yeah, like sunflowers, they recommend 1 mile. So I just.
Wow, that's quite a leap, Bob. Yeah.
If we could go 10 miles.
Yeah, to me, it strikes me as the thing about this situation is with no permitting or hurdles of any sort, he could go ahead and start trials on cultivation of non-local genetics, Siberian strains, whatever, that particularly if it, grew to some kind of commercial scale, which is essentially what he's exploring, is the agronomic potential of this species in Vermont. Then that creates a very clear potential for genetic contamination of our native populations. So, and there's no impediments to him doing that, just of his own volition. Whereas we're potentially creating all these impediments to him doing something that would avoid that and try to source the genetics locally so it doesn't carry that risk of hurting our our population. So it,
I agree.
it's sort of like he's being penalized here for trying to do the right thing.
I
It
agree.
feels like, and so
Yeah.
that's where, yeah, it's sort of a confounding situation as to what's the best approach here.
You're certainly discouraging people from doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, or we're encouraging them to do things illicitly
Yeah,
rather than
the same-
actually coming to
that's the
us.
same thing, yeah.
I mean, is your hand still up, Stephanie?
Yeah, it went back up.
Okay.
I think the genetic dilution of the Vermont species is a different regulatory issue that may not be addressed by the takings permit specifically at this point in time, because it might not have any specificity with respect to that issue. And then I think back to the seed bank, where the seed bank's role is to preserve the genetics of the Vermont species. And by giving it to this individual, and I don't know this individual, and you've all said this already, that he seems forthright and honest. But then you're put in a situation of, well, monitoring and issuing a permit. Like, if you issue this permit, you're creating a bunch of, it's going to be hard. And then it actually dilutes the purpose of the seed bank to some extent. And these are just my thoughts. So yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling a little challenged by this request, despite it having the best intentions of preserving and potentially allowing for the Vermont species of roseroot to proliferate and be in the state of Vermont. However, then I come across the non-commercial purpose standard in your takings permit, and there's tension there. I think, can we do this? Is this successful? We're gonna cultivate it here, there, in these particular places, but it seems like the permitting structure that already exists would even prevent that from happening. Anyway, thank you.
Would there be any interest of requiring him to work with, for instance, UVM or something like that, that if he is doing this experimental trial and he wants to see how it goes, that he needs to have a official research or an academic sponsor, that's a better way to do it, to actually do that. And then that potentially puts the burden on that sponsor to answer some of Brian's questions, which are how the information is going to get disseminated, all of that kind of stuff. I'm just throwing that in there.
I think in our discussions in the Flora SAG, raised the same kind of question. I think we expressed a preference to Mr. Merrick that he have a partner like that. But he hasn't seemed to pursue that apart from this connection of getting the plants.
Yeah, I think we recommended like a state or federal organization, but
Yeah, I mean,
academic, like UVM,
maybe
maybe
an extension.
makes more sense. I just want to add to Matt's comment and another analogous situation. I happen to know some herbalists that are planting hydrastis, golden seal, in the woods around Vermont. And, they're getting seeds from, we only have like 2 populations. It's state endangered. They're not taking seeds from Vermont, so they don't need any permit to do that. Technically they're putting it out in the wild, so it's a gray area. And, we wish they wouldn't do that, but if we don't provide an avenue for them to do it legally, they're going to do it on their own. They're not going to stop doing it. So it's got to be one way or the other. We either allow it and issue them guidelines in which to do it, or they're just going to keep doing it on their own. And I think the preference is for us to have some input and some control over the situation, and not just let it happen at random. We don't know where they're putting the plants. The golden seal. I asked them, and they were like, "I'm not telling you."
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Brian.
Well, Bob, and Matt and Paul have softened my opposition to this a bit, and I really see your reasoning here on trying to get some benefit from it. I mean, if you think that the potential benefit outweighs the risks here, and I don't know that I see many risks, frankly, and if indeed the statute allows us to issue a permit and we can, enhance those benefits through a permit, and it's not too much staff time. It's not like we have a recovery plan for this species. There are lots of other rare, threatened, and endangered species that need recovery plans and need work like this, for example. This is an opportunistic situation. So I guess you've softened my opposition here a bit. I would like to see better analysis of what his cultivated plots are producing. He's pretty vague in how he's going to analyze the results of this. And if that can be conditions of a permit, then I might be more inclined to support it.
Yeah, so I think maybe, I guess I'm sort of two minds. I think one is, does it make sense? I guess given John's initial sort of preamble to this conversation, does it actually make sense to say we are not going to issue a permit and we are going to allow Bob to play God and grant access to the seeds from the Native Plant Trust and put the condition out there that we would like to have him work with a researcher who can actually, have access to the results of this experiment, what the germination rate is, how whether the site condition, works for this plant, if there's any, there may be some other issues out there that could be controlled in an experiment, whether that's fertilization or watering treatment or, something along those lines. But, it also, it seems like maybe this is a reason not to grant a permit and go this other way.
That makes me nervous. We've always, I guess this isn't considered an introduction. It's not like he's putting it out at a natural site. So it is a little different from the Jacob's ladder and the milk vet.
Well, one of the sites is quasi-natural though, right? It's not like in his garden.
No, it's not in his garden, but it's not the habitat. It's not where you would find redwood.
Right.
I would not be looking in Heinsberg or Starksburg or along, or a river. It's not going to occur there naturally. So
it might be best to just say, the committee could say, if a permit is needed, X, if a permit is not needed, Y, and we have to wait and still get some legal opinion on whether we have the authority to issue a permit for the stated reasons. And you could include a statement that you believe that, or not disbelieve, whether developing a US or Vermont strain could better protect the Vermont wild population. Because we're not really sure what sort of precedent we might be setting here if we're not setting.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is, it's always, regulations or statutes or experiments in progress. And the fact that we don't necessarily have explicit, it didn't anticipate this situation. It's not because I think it was that it wasn't anticipated, not that they were trying to prevent it. So, we've got some murky space to look at with here.
Well, I think I would say I'm fine with that. Are you basically saying check in with Catherine here to see if, okay. Well, why don't we do that? And I would say, either direction we go, to me, it feels like it makes sense to say, can we connect him with a researcher, whether that's with UVM? I don't, maybe it's actually someone with the Native Plant Trust, if that's someone who's excited, would be excited about this project. I would say let's go that direction.
So include that as a condition then, that he
I think
has to
either
coordinate
way,
with some other entity.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I would
fair.
just- If I just quickly
Right.
add to it, I really would love to hear from Catherine on that as well. And the other thing, I just want to double check those plots the plot that he was talking about, that is not on state land, correct? It's bordered on 3 sides by state land, I think is what he wrote.
Right, it's his personal property.
Okay, great.
He lives in Burlington, but he owns this other property.
Okay, and if poaching is a potential problem here, that site is by virtue of our meeting is no longer secret. My guess is it's not going to be hard to find that site.
Yeah, because it's it's linked. If anyone, I don't know if anyone can access this, Roz, you would know if,
They wouldn't have access, the public wouldn't have access into the Teams drive.
Yeah.
The documents.
But the public could request the document. So, but also we could scrub the specific location from
Right, we're allowed to do that.
those things.
Okay.
If you think that's, if that's recommended.
That was among my list of concerns. I had a question of whether we could retroactively make that disclosure exempt from release under the public records law. Another question
Yes,
for
there's a
Catherine.
statute that allows us to do that.
Okay, great. We might want to do that.
okay, yeah, I would agree.
I was just gonna add, I heard earlier that the disposition of the seeds was unclear. If that would be either a proposal from the applicant or the research institution as to the disposition of the seeds, probably should be added to this application.
And what's your thoughts on that? Where should they go?
I was thinking that that the applicant would be able to propose in terms of scientific interest or propagation, meeting those standards of the permit, would make a proposal as to where they would go. Back to the seed bank, to the University of Vermont, if the partnerships with the University of Vermont, to a scientific institution interested in continuation of the species.
How about if we propose something like, it would defer back to us to give to the Native Plant Trust unless Eric can come up with a justification for keeping some of the seeds to continue the experiment for some reason. And then I guess we'd have to, assuming we issue a permit, we'd amend the permit like 5 years down the road to allow him to do something with those seeds. Don, does that seem reasonable?
Yes, I mean, to me, this, it's sort of, I think I would say maybe let's be vague on that and essentially say we can revisit this because, again, I mean, that would again then create this, whole new precedent at that point where now it's sort of gone from, something where the seeds came from, permitted collection from the trust, and then he's able to plant them. Now it sort of goes into the public domain almost. He could sell them, he could, who knows what. So I would say let's be vague on that, and because it seems like that's opening a whole nother can of worms.
Deal with it 2 or 3 years down the road.
Well, yeah.
We had similar discussions, I think, around that disposition of the actual plants themselves. If there were any of them that weren't destroyed in his sampling, what happens? Because then who continues to own those? And the thought was similar. I think that somehow you include it as a condition that he has to come back to us at the conclusion of that. To make that determination with the input of his results.
Yeah.
Further ideas about where he might want to go with it next.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to say let's move forward with this. We're getting wickedly behind schedule here, so
This is gonna be easy.
Yeah. Just listen to Brian. No. So, okay, well, hopefully then that's a way forward. We can check with Catherine and then sort of let us know what she says in terms of which direction we have to go. And if this is something we need to vote on electronically, we can take that approach as well. So, okay. All right, so now we are, yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Just to be clear, I mean, we need to move forward on this by spring, so.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I think we could do, once we have some guidance from Catherine, we could do an electronic vote.
Okay, so if Catherine decides a permit is needed,
Right,
then we'll put a draft permit together and you all would vote on it. If
Yeah.
no permit is needed,
Yeah.
then I get to play God.
right, exactly.
All right,
Yeah.
either way.
Thanks everyone for jiggering the agenda there. This one was, you can see I was kind of animated about this one for some reason. I'm going to have to duck out pretty soon, just so you know, before lunch.
Okay, all right, thanks, Brian. Well, let's go through the, well, I don't know, do we want to take 5 here? How are people doing? I guess online, I can't really see if you've left your posts or not. Why don't we take 5 and then we'll jump in. And I guess I'll just say we probably should try to be quick as we go through the SAG reports. Otherwise, we'll be here.
Yeah, mine will be quick. Yeah.
So,
And there are all the information available.
yeah, there we go. All right.
Would you find that
Just
on
listen to the one they're most interested in.
No, no,
Alex,
it's like a rich,
In the,
rich side
the
species.
remainder of the permit discussion.
Yeah.
the
Yeah, the
mammal
hardwoods
one,
primarily.
the bat one is not.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Butter
for
nut,
good reasons,
yeah.
Bill and the mammal sag.
I just thought is there
There's another
another
more round
is there
with
another
the applicant.
plant
Okay.
that has a golden
So
root
it'll
like
be something
that?
we can handle
Well,
by
wait,
email.
so there's copters.